So thanks everyone very much for coming to our webinar entitled High Performance Hiring with AI. And today we're going to talk about how generative AI and agents are transforming human resources, and just how mostly we're going to talk about hiring. Edward's going to get a demo solution as well, talk a little bit about that, but mostly we're going to be speaking just about how generative AI have changed the discipline of human resources as a whole. Okay, so, and yeah, we'll try to keep this well under the hour. And as I said before, we'll leave some time at the end for questions and discussion. So first, I'm just going to go through some background about the company and who we are, which may be familiar to some of you. And then we'll talk a little bit about the motivation behind why we're doing this webinar and why we offer the solutions that we do offer at PRAKTIKAI in human resources, and then talk about different applications of GenAI, in particular for, as I said, hiring, and then we can wrap up. All right, so first some background on the company. So if you haven't heard, PRAKTIKAI is the company that I founded and where Edward and I work. We are a new type of consulting practice, and we're really seeking to do pragmatic, value-driven applications of data and AI. We are not tied to a particular industry vertical. We are developing solutions across many different verticals. And although AI is in our name, it's actually a Greek word, and it's the Greek word for practicality. And although we do a lot of AI, we also do other things like traditional machine learning, business intelligence, and data analytics. So we've been operating full swing for about a year now. I'm coming at you from downtown Toronto, where we have an office, and we're really just seeking to do pragmatic, value-driven applications of data and AI to help Canadian businesses and industry. Okay. And now we'll just briefly introduce ourselves. So thanks again for coming. I'm Myles Harrison. I'm the founder and principal of the company. I've done a lot of data and AI consulting in the past at the Big Five. I worked at Accenture and PwC. I also got my start in digital analytics in the agency world and was kind of lucky enough to ride the hype wave of big data into doing data science work. So over that time, I've worked in a lot of projects in different industry verticals, manufacturing, transportation, retail, finance, lots and lots of different verticals that I got to work on projects in, and now doing the same with PRAKTIKAI. So I'll let Edward introduce himself.
Hi, yes, Edward Johnson. There's plenty there to read. So I'm currently working with Myles as a data and AI strategy consultant. That means many things and not so many things. What it means is that I'm taking my experience of, it's over 20 years, it's maybe even nearly to 30 years of experience in large and small enterprises, usually at the edge of digital transformation, whether it's bringing in new technology or new items, new areas, new philosophies. And I have been a CTO at a medium-sized private bank, so I've seen the full stack from top to bottom. My experience has been in mainly financial services, capital markets, but I've also been in healthcare, which is completely different, retail, and of course, supply chain. A number of things, as well as working at Hewlett-Packard, so a provider of tech services. So my role here is I'll be doing a demo, which, like a number of other people within PRAKTIKAI, I actually still code. So even after all those years, it does make sense to still code and still see what is really going on behind what AI really means. Thank you, Myles.
Great. Okay, so a little more about the company before we get into it. The 5 founding principles and core values of PRAKTIKAI. Obviously, at the top, practicality is the driving force behind all that we do and how we help our clients. We're not doing, AI for the sake of AI. It should be pragmatically driven, and there should be clear value behind it. On that note as well, in terms of it being straightforward, I'm very big on clarity. I spent a lot of time in the consulting world, and sometimes a lot of the language and the things they talk about becomes very complex and very almost obfuscating what you're really doing. So it's our belief that even though the work we can end up doing is quite technical, if you can't explain it very simply to someone who's non-technical, then that means you don't really understand it. So we really try to avoid things like a lot of technical jargon and acronyms, and just make it very clear what we're doing and how it works so that anyone can understand it. Excellence is another one of our qualities. Here, everyone on the team works very hard and we all hold each other and hold ourselves to very, very high standards. And as my father likes to say, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And then the last two, but still equally important, if not more important, values are on the human side. I'm very, very big on authenticity and letting people be who they are. I don't like to do business with other organizations or people in a very transactional way. So we seek to, in the fifth value, in the spirit of that, seek to form very long-lasting close relationships with our clients and the folks we work with. And we see working with our clients as more being colleagues and working alongside them and co-creating with them as sort of a traditional, consultant-client kind of relationship. Okay, so if none of that means a lot to you, basically what we do is we help organizations use data, analytics, and AI to solve the business problems they have and drive value. We're not here to buy into the hype and do these things for the sake of doing them. Okay, so that's quite enough about the company, and now we can talk about the motivation, about why we are here, and why we want to talk about using AI in the human resources space. Okay, so I think people on this call, on this webinar, work in the space, and so are probably quite familiar with some of the pain points around the type of work that you do. And this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the issues with doing the type of work that you do when you work with people, and people are the material you work with. A lot of the processes that are done in HR can be very, very time consuming. And like many different disciplines and verticals and business functions, a lot of it can be very, very manual. And this is very, very time consuming. So regardless of the type of work you do, there's always opportunities for optimizing processes or automating processes. But this is especially true in human resources. There's also a lot of rules and obligations that you have to follow when you do things like staff a company or pay your people. And so there's a lot of things you have to keep track of in terms of being compliant with the law. In Ontario in particular, obviously there's the Ontario Employment Standards Act, or ESA, and then there's other legislation as well at a federal level and country to country and stuff like that. So on a related note, another problem in HR that is in a lot of different disciplines and doesn't have a solution per se, but is something to be mitigated, is bias, right? Whether you're hiring in a biased way or even just like writing things that you put out in a biased way, this is something that is a problem. And at the end of the day, a lot of what we do when working with people is very subjective. In traditional machine learning, you can have, your ground truth. You can say this is right or this is wrong. But when you're working with people and talking about people's skill sets and backgrounds and compensation, things like this, the lines get a little muddier, and it's very, very subjective. The other thing is especially true now with all the good things that generative AI can do. There's also some bad things that it can do. And even before we had generative AI, there's a very, very, very large volume of applicants that people that work in HR have to screen through. And so you can kind of get what is called like a screening fatigue, where you sort of lose your decision-making power after time, or you hear stories about people that work in hiring having a stack of resumes and just grabbing a subset of them and only looking at those and then saying things like, I can't afford to hire someone who's not lucky, right? And now with AI and applicants being able to, like, I would say poor applicants taking time to just write resumes or applications or cover letters, this problem has only been exacerbated. So the last two things we see, a lot of inconsistency. Obviously, this can be in things like hiring. It can also be in the job descriptions. It can also be in the interactions with the actual people that are working in the human resources department, right? So some people that are looking at working in a particular company, or people that work at a company and are trying to resolve issues by working with HR, depending on who they work with, they might get very, very different experiences in terms of what they're told or how they're dealt with or how timely they're dealt with. And so all of this can lead to a very poor candidate experience, because we're mainly talking about hiring here. That doesn't reflect well on the brand. I'm hearing horror stories in this economy of people doing things like having a fifth stage interview and then being ghosted at the end. But also, it's not just for candidates. Internally, if the processes in this business function are not consistent, you're not also going to have a good experience for your employees, right? So how can we help with AI instead of making these things worse? So a couple ideas to address each of these points. Obviously, the way to make things less time consuming is to try to make them more efficient. And I would argue that that's most of what we do in consulting. And so there's a lot of automation that can be applied to make the whole process of working with people less time consuming. Even though AI itself can have biases in it, depending on how you use it or maybe the type of data it has, it can also be used to detect bias, and you can inquire or quiz like AI and give it information and say, hey, like, do you think this is biased, or compare this to other things. There's also more traditional ways you can apply machine learning to enforce compliance and also make sure there's no bias. And this is more kind of a data analytics and prediction type task. You can use AI to guide decision making. And so this is really, I would say, with all these things, I wouldn't trust an AI absolutely, but you are having sort of another somewhat impartial third party as input to different processes that you do within human resources. And tied together to the first point, if you make these processes more efficient and you use automation by using these tools like we're going to demonstrate today, it's much easier to deal with this very, very high volume by leveraging AI tools. And that's what AI should be used for. It's to automate kind of low-level knowledge work and manual processes. It's not to replace anyone's job, right? And doing all those things will lead to more consistency. You can also use generative AI to review kind of all the materials in your human resources department for consistency. And then hopefully all those things together will lead to a much better candidate, and I would also say just employee experience. Okay, so that's the motivation. And now we can talk about actually applying AI in human resources. And I will very quickly just talk a little bit at a super high level about what AI is and what machine learning is and things like that at this point in time. And then we can dive into the applications for the topic of this webinar, which is specifically related to hiring. Okay. So if you ask anybody what AI is, you'll probably get a different answer from everyone. But to me and to us at PRAKTIKAI, AI as a whole, the field, is really comprised of these things. You have a very large amount of data that is used to train models or that you're making predictions about. You have different statistical algorithms that are used to build the models and perform tasks or make predictions. Those are applied through different algorithms. Those together make up the different models that perform different tasks. Now, when people talk about generative AI, they usually mean generative tasks, right? Generating text or other types of media. And then in order to implement those, you need a very large amount of code and you need a very large amount of compute. Most of this stuff does not really affect us in the day to day as we use AI, as I would kind of say, as like consumers, like where we use, D to C, direct to consumer AI tools. But for most of us, what we care about are the different models and what the different models can do. So specifically for generative AI, we see different models for different types of what I would call modalities. By far, the most common and well-known one is working with text. Most of these are really just a chatbot now, but we're seeing more and more advanced capabilities in these models. The rise of reasoning models, as they're so called, and being able to perform complex tasks. And now we're seeing this transition from sort of text-based generation into using that text to take actions, and that leads into what we call like agentic behavior or AI agents, right? And then the other types of modalities, generating media, images or video now even, which has really taken leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and even media like audio. So this actually goes both ways. You can have generative AI models take in audio and transcribe speech into text, or you can have generative AI models take in text and then generate speech, in a particular voice. Okay, so how does that fit into hiring? I'm really just going to talk about the first modality here. We're primarily going to be talking about working with text-based models. And really, when you talk about using these consumer-facing AI tools and platforms, when you work with text, they really only do a few things that they're really good at. This is obviously not exhaustive, but the types of things that people typically use them for are writing something, right? Crafting a document. It's much easier to get an AI help you than start from a blank page. Outlining documents, I actually find this is sometimes more useful than relying on the AI to write anything. Just give me an outline and let me work from there. Summarizing, which is kind of the reverse, taking a large amount of text, or as we'll see, even audio that's been transcribed, and then just getting us down to the brass tacks and making it more digestible. And then now, even when I talk about things like reasoning models and things like that, we can actually use the more performant models, the more frontier models, as they're called, to even help us evaluate things, right? So I don't like the term reasoning because it's a bit anthropomorphic, but we can actually ask these tools to help us make subjective evaluations of things, right? So those are the different things that the AI can do. And if you look at the stages in a workflow of hiring someone, this is not exhaustive either, but you're probably doing these main few things. You're writing some kind of job posting first, and then letting people out there in the world know that you're hiring. And so these AI tools can help with that in a couple ways. They can help you outline the job posting if you've never hired for that type of role before, or if the format has significantly changed. And then you can actually just ask them to help you write the content of the posting itself. This, I wouldn't just copy and paste and take out of the tool as it is, but it's a lot easier than writing it kind of from scratch yourself. And then after you post the job, you get a whole bunch of applicants, and you have to go through a lot of different resumes, and you have to screen out the candidates that you think are good potentials, right? So this is actually a case where you wouldn't necessarily be using AI as much to create text, but you would be using AI to help summarize and make sense of the volume of applications, right? So we were talking about the high volume problem. You can do something like take 100 or 1,000 resumes and feed them into AI and say, hey, just summarize these resumes as a whole, and then also help me pick out the ones that you think are actually hitting the different points that were in the original JD, right? And so that's kind of more the evaluation piece as well. You could actually ask the AI to be your assistant and help you screen out some of the applicants. So then once you screen those initial applicants, you're ready to start interviewing. There is a whole discussion to be had, which I'm sure could fill an hour in itself, about 100% automated AI interviews, and the horror stories associated with it. I'm talking about, virtual avatars interviewing someone and things like that. I'm not going to get into that or suggest that here. But even when you do an interview, provided you have the consent of the interviewee, right? As long as that is true, you're using the writing capability here of generative AI, but not for creating content, but for recording the audio and then taking a transcription. And now this is very commonplace, right? You can do this in Microsoft Teams. You can do it in Zoom. There's different AI note takers. Now we can use these tools all the time to do that, and we have a transcription of the whole interview. So we're not living in a world where you have to go back and say, what exactly did they say and who said what when, right? And then finally, when you're done interviewing, you can actually select the different candidates. So you can rely on the help of the AI to do things like, again, transcribe the audio recordings, but even also just like write some of the communications to the candidates that weren't selected. And if you have a small volume, I would argue that there are ways to use AI to customize this in a way that, if you will permit me to say, is less insulting than receiving a very large, sending out a very large volume of exactly the same kind of, rejection emails or communications. And I think this is a common problem that a lot of candidates have that makes the whole experience not great. And then finally, using the reasoning ability of the AI again, not for screening, but to look at the text that has been transcribed from the audio of the interviews to also give you input about, which interviews went the best and which candidates you think you want to pick out of the actual ones that went on to the interview stage. Okay, so that's a lot. And now I think we're going to drop down one more level and look at those different parts of the workflow in particular. And for that, I will hand it over to Edward.
Thank you. Myles, do you mind if you click the slides through for me
Yeah, I can do
instead?
that. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. There was quite a lot in there with Myles. If you're familiar, if you're HR people, of course, you'll be very familiar. But we just took a few things out. There's going to be 4 scenarios here that I'm just going to go through. What are the objectives? For instance, when you put up a job posting, you wanna have something that is good for the candidate to read, that they will understand what they need to do. But one of your problems is always going to be how are you going to write that, role specific. Most HR people do not know all the nuances of every single domain that is actually in a firm. So there will be some back and forth between the HR manager and maybe the hiring manager, back and forth. They can be that, but in the end, there should be some items which are common, and you should be able to speed this up without having so many back and forths. So you can use AI to help you to draft those things under certain constraints. The constraints can come from the HR as well as from the hiring manager, and you can ensure that you get a better quality for the candidate when they have a look at this. And you can also link that to the applicant tracking system. These are the systems that are used in the back end when people apply, and make a loop there. I won't go too far into that, but that's another aspect. Please go ahead, Myles. Next slide. For the application review. So once you are going to you're going to review your applications, you want to make sure that these are really sticking to what your brand stands for. You should be doing that. I know that if it has not always been done, but you should be doing that. And not just to make sure that the boilerplate is there, but actually that the way it sounds like a company that someone should want to work for the right reasons. Now, the thing is, reading through all of those things, when you do that and you check all the resumes, you might not be able to work that through from the candidates. So what you can do with AI is screen the resumes much faster than doing it by hand. And you can generate some results, some summaries, other things. You can put them together even. You can rank them. You can do multiple things with AI. Next slide, please. We go to the interview stage. Interviewing, you will all know, and we have all experienced, everybody who's ever had a job has experienced different qualities of interviews. Have you ever been to an interview you've said to yourself, wow, that was a great interview, not just because of me, but also because of the interviewer. I really want to join this company. And but you might have another interview with someone in the same company and the quality is totally different. So this stems a bit from the skill of the interviewer, but also from the prep time. And what AI can be used for is to help to reduce the prep time, to make the prep more consistent. It can help to make it nearer to what should be the right evidence. And so you can then, if you're an interviewer, you can then rank the people you're interviewing in a fairer manner. Next slide, please. Yes, now the candidate selection. So if you've been interviewing people, you will have your pet way of taking your notes. You may use models to help you. You may use anything that allows you to rank. You might have a separate panel. You might do it electronically. The thing is, it's usually very subjective. I'll give an example. I spoke to a recruiter a few days ago, and I said, what's the toughest thing about interviewing people? And she said that it's when you interview in a panel and you have different nuances in the panel, you have different ways of taking notes, and you just can't agree very quickly. So there are ways, I would say, using AI, there are ways of doing this in a much faster way to help to make better decisions and also to give responses back amongst the management. Let's say it's 3 levels of management that's doing this, to give the responses back between those faster and definitely in a repeatable manner. So these are just 4 ways that AI can be used and can further develop the way that HR can work. Okay, so this is a demo. I know that Ivana, you may have seen this. Not only seen it, you may have even touched this. This is a demo of a product that we are building up, and this product is called AI Voxvery. Voxvery, you can imagine it links with sound. This is for voice interviewing candidates. It's for screening candidates. Now, just to say a couple of things about screening. Some people don't want to talk to an AI, especially if they're going to be interviewed. Some people don't mind, depending on their motivation. What we know for sure is that if you put a job out, and this example is really about a software developer or software engineer, within 2 or 3 days, you will have maybe 500 applicants applying for this role. And it's almost impossible to go quickly through 500 applicants because many of them will have had their resumes built with AI. Some will have them generated. There are tools now where you can actually generate, you can just give a lot of details in and you have generators which will send your resume to hundreds of websites. So if you're a recruiter, an HR person, how do you manage that? And also, there are aspects of bias. Some people would like to use such a tool, but they're afraid of the bias that may be behind it. And there are other privacy aspects. And I'm sure some of you will have other questions about it. But today, when you apply for a job on a website, it's very likely it will go through to an applicant tracking system, which will rank whether your resume is a good enough resume to even qualify to be seen by a human. This is a different approach that we're building, and we're working with some recruiters about that to and what it would be is when a person, let's say they apply for a job on a website, they will then be given back a code, a unique code, which will guide them through to this portal. And this portal, which I'm about to show you, will request for them to make an interview with it within a certain time period. It could be 1, 2, or 3 days. They can do that anytime during that period, but that's what it will be. So I'm just going to share my screen now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually mimic a person who has applied as a software engineer for a software engineering job. And this is how it will go. This will be very short. It's just a couple of minutes. So they'll get this portal. Of course, it will look different depending on the company and some other things. They won't be able to upload their job description or their candidate ID because the system will already have those. And what the system is going to do is dynamically generate unique questions for that person. So this will have read through their resume. It will compare that with the job description, and not from a bank of questions, but it will dynamically. There is an LLM, large language model, and AI behind the system that generates this question. So this question is very, you have to answer it within 30 seconds. Can I describe a challenging bug that I faced and how I resolve it? I'm going to answer that right now. So, yes, I have had a challenge with a bug, and this was from an old IBM system, which I needed to convert code for a new system. Now, I wasn't able to understand the old bug that I created when I was converting, so I had to work with somebody who was a senior with the old system, get to know them, get to understand how they code, and to communicate with them forwards. And this is how we could resolve and test it. Now, you will notice that I had just 30 seconds to react to this question. I had to do that on the fly, which I have just done. There is the second question already popping up. I will answer that in a sec. But what I couldn't do is quickly copy and paste that question somewhere else to generate an answer because the system is really waiting to see as soon as you click to get the question, how soon will you answer? And there will be some other guardrails in there as well. So I will answer this one and then I'll go to question 3 very quickly. So how do I stay updated with the latest advancements in technology and programming languages? Well, I do something like this. I will go to webinars to learn. I will talk with my peers. I will talk with mentors and I will read. And then I will take my experience of languages that I already know and systems I've built and try to build them with the new languages hands-on, and I will find out how they really work. So that is the end of that. Okay, so I won't do question number 3. We'll do that through the slides. But what I will show you is that the system is going to actually generate. It will finish this and it will pass on to question 3. And as you can see, this has taken me probably 3, 4 minutes of talking. It's going to pop up with the third question. Okay, that would be it. So this is the interview results summary. Now, it looks, you may not realize the top part. You say, what is that with all these things? That is actually blockchain. I'll come back to that. The main point for this slide is, as you see at the bottom, I scored 66.7% from the aspects of talking and answering the questions, and it shows as a recommend. Now that means recommend for the recruiter to have a further look at me. If you can imagine 5 or 6 or 300 or 400 of these tests that were done with different people, at some point we want to see in a more granular way, how did they manage to get those scores? So if we go to the next slide, the next, yeah. So here was an example of that I did answer for question 1. So obviously this is a slide from something we did earlier. Now you will see 4 different aspects of this is how the AI is, and these are agents that are being developed. One is behavioral, and that is very much people will want to ask about that. The second is problem solving. So how quickly have you demonstrated that you can solve a problem quickly? And there you see on the third top left, top right is communication. Another thing that could be discussed about how can an AI understand how well someone communicates, but there are ways. And the fourth is also technical, which is important if this is for a technical role, which it is. So you see the feedback listed. This is the feedback coming straight from the LLM, which has also been tuned to speak in a certain way. And as you see, the explanation lacks certain technical details. Of course, in 30 seconds, what can you say? But that's fine. There's some tuning, maybe the length of time maybe needs to be different. But one of the main aspects here is that when somebody or something has to speak to a test, it helps to rule out whether AI is being used from the speaker or not. That can really be well assessed, and there's a lot of experience with that. So that for the recruiter can remove a lot of people straight away. Now, if we go to the next slide, you'll see a list of results. So this is a dashboard that has been built up of just a sample. So there you've probably got 10. Let's say this was expanded by hundreds. I've color coded it so you can see who did the best at certain ways. And as you can see, of the 10, only 2 out of 10 were recommended. So if you multiply that up by 300, you'll just get you won't get that many that are recommended through. And what you would do as a recruiter team, I'm going to say, is you would compare this with the results that you're getting from your applicant tracking system, because you don't want to rely only on one system to give you some advice. So you do the comparison. Now, this is voice to text systems. There have been a couple of recruiters that have said, I want more of a human aspect. I would love to be able to hear the person's saying their answers. That's a matter of volume and other things. So the other aspect that I should mention is the PII, the personally identifiable information. You'll see there's an ID on the left, the second column. The back end of this system, which does hold the information, will only hold things on an ID basis, not by a name basis. And the job ID will be mangled in there and hidden. So the idea is that you don't include new bias because you know someone's name or you know the role and so on. So that's where I would wrap up on this demo about this tool. The tool is just to show that AI can be used to help. And this is just at the screening level. So far, a human has not interviewed another person yet, but it's another way, and it could be a good supplemental way. Thank you, Myles.
Thank you. All right, we're getting close to time, and I do want to leave time for questions. So just to wrap up, we talked very specifically in this webinar about hiring, but inside of PRAKTIKAI, the entire sort of solution suite that we're going to offer and do offer within human resources, we are calling Kai Human. So Kai is the Greek word for and so all of our different solutions are under Kai. And so there's many different use cases and applications of data and AI, not just generative AI, as we went through in the demo today, and not just for obviously the hiring use case. So there's lots of different solutions we can offer. You can talk about the actual acquisition process and optimizing that. Obviously, that was what we talked about here. But there's lots of other aspects where data and AI can be applied, things like workforce planning, optimizing the allocation of staff, and forecasting staffing needs. These are very much based on more data analysis and traditional machine learning, forecasting, and prediction, doing business intelligence and analytics around the engagement of your staff and your employees, depending on how you choose to measure that. And then another huge one is churn, right? Especially with the way talent is today, organizations that have really, really good high performers are concerned about having them leave and go somewhere else. So how do you know when someone is, if you'll pardon me, a flight risk, or maybe more looking at your organization inward, how do you do churn prediction and then identify the factors that are most important and then work to ameliorate those factors within your organization to make the best players you have stay with the company and improve your employee retention. And then finally, there is a learning and development aspect. This is much more as well around traditional machine learning recommendation, looking at not just providing sort of a one-size-fits-all plan for building up your people, but having more personalization and different learning paths that can be informed by data. Okay, so much that can be done, and happy to talk more about any of these different use cases and any of the different solutions we are developing within the Kai Human Suite. That will pretty much do it for today. So if you would like to chat more, happy to set up a short call with Edward or myself or both of us, and you can do so at our short link, which is prktk.ai/discover, and we're happy to continue the conversation. Okay, so that is pretty much it. We'll drop that link in the chat as well, and I will turn off the recording here and we can open the floor to questions.